resume, and got item 12 on the agenda, which is the social mitigation action plan strategy, and Tim is going to see to the paper. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Boyd. This paper really picks up both on the item before lunch around COVID, but also around the personal aspects of COVID that were covered very eloquently by people right at the start of the meeting, and the paper sets out a strategy and an action plan for dealing with the longer term and wider impacts of COVID, which are potentially even more important than the shorter term effects. I'd like to welcome the two people who made the perhaps most significant contributions to drawing up the report. Alison McGrory from Argyll and Bute, and Linda Thompson from North Highland, who both work within public health, and they'll be able to answer more specific questions in a few minutes. The paper sets out the background to COVID and the important mitigating factors to control wider effects. I need to make an apology that there is a little bit of a disruption in the order of the paper within the whole papers that are there, and I think it's the main strategy and action plan starts on page 104 of the papers. What it does is set out various wider effects on society of COVID, those that have been identified through consultation and work across NHS Highland. It's not absolutely comprehensive, but it captures the main areas of a wider impact. And then the paper covers actions which are needed in terms of mitigation. So the areas are unemployment and the economy, income and financial security, and those two clearly go together in terms of the financial impact that COVID has really had on the on local people. And tourism was mentioned earlier in the case of in the context of risk, but tourism has a massive impact on economic well-being. Then we have individual food security, mental health and well-being, which is clearly an important and long-standing challenge locally, but one that has been worsened by COVID. Drugs and alcohol, digital inclusion, overall capacity and of communities and their resilience, and then transport and violence against women. So those themes are set out, and then there are mitigations. With this sort of paper, it's always going to be difficult to get a balance around what individuals can do, what organisations can do, and particularly what NHS Highland can do as compared with other organisations. But the partnership working is essential in order to take forward issues such as income and employment and essentially all the others. But it's important that NHS Highland plays its own part, and I hope that members will recognise that within the action plan and agree to the recommendations. So Just before we open up for questions, can I just ask whether Linda or Alison have any additional comments to make?
I don't think I have anything extra to add, Tim. Thank you. Just happy to take any questions.
Yeah, all I would say is I'm delighted to see this paper being presented to the board, because in normal times health improvement is about all of the social determinants of health and how we mitigate them, and clearly the pandemic has really amplified that and brought that into focus, and it's given us a profile in terms of how we might as an organisation be able to take forward the mitigation work that we're clearly already doing. So things like child poverty, suicide prevention, mental health improvement, these are core strands of our health improvement plan, but it's pulling that together within the social mitigation strategy, which I think is really, really good at the moment. So thank you, Tim.
Yeah, Boyd, I'd be happy to open that up to any questions.
Okay, thanks, Tim, Linda, and Alison for these introductory remarks, and I invite colleagues to come in with questions on this very, very important subject. Sarah.
Thank you, Boyd. Really welcome this paper. I think this is a fantastic direction to be looking in, and I'm really pleased that Alison is here today. I know Alison through her work in the Health and Social Care Partnership in Argyll and Bute. I'm going to say two possibly contradictory things, actually, but I think them both, so I'm going to say them. First of all, I think that there was a section, I can't find exactly which page it is on now, but there was a section where it refers to the locality planning groups that we have in Argyll and Bute as being a sort of a support structure to help deliver the action plan. And I think that's fantastic, and I'm really pleased to see that in there. I think, however, we do need to be aware of the limitations of some of these structures, and I'm thinking specifically about the locality planning group, or groups rather, and they existed before COVID, but they hadn't really reached that level of maturity that we needed from them, and then obviously COVID sort of really disrupted that, and so we have taken a few backward steps with our locality planning groups. We're not quite where we want to be just yet. So I suppose it's just recognizing with any of these partners and structures that there will be limitations. But that being said, I think actually it's fantastic to see all of our partner and stakeholder organisations referenced. And actually, I would maybe make a request that we strengthen that a little bit further. I think on page 92 it talks about the different kind of partners. We've got the Argyll and Bute section and the Highland section, and then there's the partner organisation section, and it's just things like, I think we could perhaps pull some more detail out there. So for example, we haven't explicitly said Argyll and Bute Council are a partner, or the Argyll and Bute community planning partnerships in that section on partner organisations. So it's just really, because I think it's a fantastic way to go, and I just think we need to make sure that we really highlight the different people that we can be working with. But really brilliant paper, thank you.
So maybe before we get Tim to respond, we can have other contributions. Graham Bell.
Tim, thank you for it's really good to see this longer term view and the longer term planning. It really does help build a much more resilient society. So really appreciate that. Also, you refer to the complexity and how this actually straddles all sectors of society. NHS is in a great position here for that kind of overview, but I'm just interested in how you think then the solutions begin to develop over the time, and how it moves from really just being a kind of analysis of the problem into what we do about it over the coming months and years. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see it. Oh yes, there are other hands Okay, Adam.
Thanks, Boyd. Thanks, Tim. Interested in the fair work concepts and proposals around pages 106 and 107. The actions identified are kind of general in this regard at the moment, but I suppose I feel that we have a number of responsibilities in this regard. Obviously, firstly, as an employer, secondly, as a contractor and commissioner of services, where we should be looking for the fair work principles to be applying, and thirdly, in terms of working with other partners. So I suppose my question is, have we identified specific actions yet in this regard, or is it really about a recognition of these principles, a need to identify what actions might be required and then bring forward a plan? And I suppose if it's the latter, one of the things I'd like to see is us signing up, NHS Highland signing up to the Fair Work principles, which is a little bit like in some ways the staff governance standard, but different in that obviously it applies in other sectors and to other employers as well.
Okay, I think we'll go back to you now, Tim, for some responses from yourself and the team to these various points.
Thank you very much, Boyd. I'll just say a little bit, and then I'll open it to the other two. Certainly, in terms of our Argyll and Bute partners, yes, I think we'd be very happy to strengthen that in terms of the overall working and implementation of the plan. For solutions over time, I think one of the key things there is to make sure that this isn't seen as a standalone document, but it's integrated into the strategic approach of the organisation and how the board works with partners, because most of the features, if not all the features of COVID social mitigation, are about general health improvement, and we need to link that into future strategy. And in terms of fair work, there are some further specific actions that are detailed within the action plan, which go a little bit further down the road that Adam you've identified. But perhaps I will hand over to Linda and Alison, who may wish to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I wonder if I might just go first. Sorry, Alison. Adam, I'm just thinking in terms of what you've talked about in fair work.
Seem to have lost the sound from Linda temporarily. Could we maybe go to Alison now?
Yeah, I will wait for Linda to come back and answer that point specifically.
Sorry,
I think
folks.
she will. Oh,
I do apologise.
Yeah, on you go, Linda.
I'm so sorry. So bear with me. So I was just saying, Adam, about some of the fair work stuff we're looking at. So we're exploring at the moment accreditation of real living wage.
Yeah, we've lost you again.
Linda. Yeah, she's not having much joy. I know she will have quite a bit to say on that. It's a really important piece of work, and she and my colleague Jenny Dryden in Argyll and Bute are really cited on that. I think, Adam, it was your point that the latter primarily in terms of recognising those principles and developing plans round about that. But, you know, I think we as NHS employers, those of us who are in employment, are in a very fortunate position in terms of having security of employment, and recognising that that isn't the case in lots of our, particularly our rural dispersed populations, where there's that reliance on tourism and fragile economic circumstances at the best of times. So yeah, it's upholding those principles, but also in terms of those wider recognitions in terms of the people that we're serving with health and social care services. If I see Linda's nodding, so hopefully she's back online. I'll maybe carry on and come back to Graham's point, if I may, because I think that's of paramount importance. It's really important that strategies aren't just reference documents that sit on the shelf. They clearly have to influence and impact. And I'm talking more in terms of my Argyll and Bute experience, but we're embedded within strategic planning. So the strategic planning group has a sight of this as a draft document, and will be taken out. We'll have next steps in terms of promoting and raising awareness of this being endorsed after today, and comms round about that. There's also the commissioning strategy, which is underway, and I know there's similar work underway in North Highland. But this is how we procure and commission our services, and this goes to the heart of what we're doing in terms of building capacity and support within communities, because that's very often where people can get that first port of call to make those social adversities better. So if we can build capacity around about that in terms of breaking down loneliness, providing social support, relationship support, money advice, volunteering opportunities, that really is at the heart of our communities, and commissioning goes to the heart of how we build that across NHS Highland.
I wonder if Linda's able to come in.
I'll have a go, but I'm seeing signs coming up on my laptop, so I may drop off again. Are folks hearing me just now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I was just going to talk about Adam's reference to Fair Work and accreditation of real living wage, and a desire to seek that, both for our own employers, which we are currently. We're a real living wage employer at the moment in terms of our own staff, but not necessarily our procured services. And that would be a real message if we could get down that route around tackling poverty and creating fair work. And the other thing we're looking at is community wealth building. That's a much longer term aim, but I think again that's something that I know our partners, and I'm seeing Adam nod, and again that's the desire in the action plan. The beef isn't on the bones around that, but that's where I would like to be seeing this heading towards, and the discussions that would support some of those principles around that. And then just to highlight, Alison's covered around CPPs, but we are well plugged into the community planning partnerships. I agree with Sarah's points actually about what she said about whether they're kind of geared up and able to do that. But particularly, I would like to see our own organisation, NHS Highland, supporting this work and supporting those people who are represented on the different CPPs. And that would feel to me like a real way forward in terms of governance of all of this. So that feels to me like the way that we should be going in terms of supporting people around our own discussions that we take place and take on to our partners as well. Hope that made sense, and I hope I was heard as well. So I apologise for the problems. Thank you.
Loud and clear, Linda, that's fine. Some more contributions, Alex and then Jerry. I think Anne had her hand up before as well. Don't see it now, but if you want to come in after Jerry.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Tim, Alison and Linda, this is a very good paper. I'm pleased to see it. I think it's something that we need to be pushing forward with and fully support from the board. Bearing in mind that the NHS is one of the major employers in the Highlands. The Highland Council is another major employer in the Highlands. If we can get together, and this is mainly, it's not just for fair pay is good, but we can actually, and I've seen it worked, you can actually force contractors to employ a percentage of small businesses, etc., that tend to be local. So you're trying to force the economic power to stay within the Highlands. You can also look at things like number of apprentices, and again, they have to be localised. All these kind of strategies we should be helping push forward, which will help with the income, and then, as I say, hopefully help with the problems of inequality that we have within our community. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Jerry.
Thank you, Boyd. Probably just one comment and one seeking a bit of clarification. I think my comment is just actually to say 100% support and this and delighted at the papers here. I think for me then it's how the board then demonstrate their active support. I think that's the key message in here. Our active support. It's okay to say, oh, we've approved the paper, now everybody go off and do it. But I think it's our active support of that. And one question of it, and anybody who's followed the link on the board register of interest will see I'm interested in this. there is no mention in here of fuel poverty. Is that captured in the other poverty strands? I just wanted to be clear on that.
So I wonder if I might come in. So you're right, fuel poverty isn't explicitly labelled in here, although we do have work involved around fuel poverty and so on. So, and you're absolutely right to highlight it in terms of the impact in rural areas. So I think that could be very easily included into the income and financial inclusion work that we're doing.
And if Deirdre were here, she certainly would have mentioned it. Is that Anne? Are you able to come in? Do you want to come in?
So I think really I would like to echo what Jerry's just said there. I'm very supportive and very pleased to see the paper here. And as somebody who in a former life used to be responsible for developing cross-organisational, cross-partner strategies and plans, you know, similar to this, I've got a lot of sympathy for Linda and her colleague from Argyll and Bute in terms of what a challenge it must have been to develop this work. And I also congratulate them on the extent to which they have tried to make a reality of it being an inclusive and engaging process in getting us to this stage. But I think, as as people have said, this is very much the start of a dialogue through which we will develop more specific actions and targets. And I am really conscious. Well, one thing I note from the paper is that the public health team are mentioned as leading on an awful lot of this activity. So again, I think we need to think about how the board's committees, and I put my hands up as chair of Highland Health and Social Care Committee here, can support the public health team to ensure the organisation as a whole really gets behind this approach. So I think we need to, I would be interested to hear what the thinking is about how we, I suppose, hold ourselves to account going forward as to whether we are, really developing strong actions on the back of this plan, and how we might monitor and indeed measure what impact our actions are having in the longer term. Thank you.
Thanks. Back to you, Tim, and your team for some responses to these points.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that what is really good is to see the support from across the board and recognition that this is a matter for the board. And it's just like COVID is something which affects everything and the whole society and isn't a public health issue, however much we might lead on elements of tackling COVID. So the social mitigation is something which is a wider board responsibility and responsibility of partners as well. So that it's great to see that and recognition around the role of employers. But we need, as a board, to keep coming back to the issues. One of the actions or recommendations is to agree for reports to come back, and they need to be real challenging reports on how we are working with our partners to address these, how issues such as real living wage or other employment issues or aspects of poverty are genuinely being tackled, and how we can get the actions really embedded within the work of the CPPs. So in terms of more specifics, I'll pass on to my colleagues.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that comment you made in terms of recognising public health are definitely agents. And I said at the outset that, you know, this is our normal core bread and butter. So it's right that we're referenced within that. But I think in terms of the leadership of the board, it is really important in terms of that scrutiny, because in terms of our demand for our services, you know, I suppose if we're thinking that through in terms of recognising that there will be unmet need in terms of mental health, for example. So in normal times, you could potentially say there was unmet needs in terms of people having to wait for services. So it's about looking at how we're delivering things currently and thinking in terms of that service improvement process, how we can improve outcomes for people by doing things differently. I think that runs through the work that is happening in Argyll and Bute, for example, in terms of transformation, and some of that is savings driven in terms of the need to be more efficient in how we do things, but also being cited on how we can deliver better outcomes for the people that come through our services. And I think that's hugely important for the board to have leadership on. And we, again, in terms of the domains of public health, there's 3 domains: health protection, health improvement, and service improvement is the third. And we have colleagues who are very cited on that, and we've got expertise on that. But clearly it's about working with our services, and it's also about engaging and getting the voice of people who use those services so that we can improve.
I think I would just endorse that. And in particular, I guess for me, it's about having that conversation across the whole organisation. So, for example, wouldn't it be great if all of our staff at admission had conversations about money? And, was there something we could do to signpost it? Now, we're not welfare support advisors, but we do know people who are. So it's that kind of conversation, I think, that could be supported by public health improvement, but needs to be taken at a wider organisational level. And it's that I think we need to sign up to, about how this is it's not a public health document. And while we may be leading on lots of different work, I don't think that I feel comfortable that we had identified as necessarily, it's not a public health document. It should be and needs to be an NHS Highland document.
Okay, Alex, is that the legacy hand?
On my system, my hand's down, but Alistair's hand's up.
It's down now. Okay, I don't see Alistair's hand, but Alistair.
Yeah, I think my hand is showing halfway down for some reason. I just want to build on. Firstly, I should declare a non-financial interest. I didn't think I would need to, as General Manager of Inverness, Badenoch and Strathspey Citizens Advice Bureau, but it's non-financial, so I'll speak on this. Just building on Linda's point, this is not a public health document, and it shouldn't be. It should be everybody's document, because everybody's got a role to play in trying to sort out poverty and inequality. And I just want to say that what I've noticed in the past year through wearing other hats is that for the first time, a whole new range of customers, clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, have fallen into this poverty trap or have fallen into the inequality trap, partly because of the employment situation. So somebody working perhaps just above living wage is suddenly being furloughed, or and finds themselves with a 20% cut in their pay, which is different to getting 80% of your pay when you tell someone it's a 20% cut. So a 20% cut in their pay, that puts pressure on their debt situation. They then have to decide, do they pay their rent? Do they buy food? Do they heat their house? And that's where the fuel poverty angle comes into it. But I think the biggest worry at the moment that I see is when the moratorium on evictions and repossessions is lifted, and the outcome of what's happening with staff on furlough and businesses, what's actually going to happen then, that we'll see a huge tsunami or a wave of additional people needing the interventions of NHS, Citizens Advice, Highland Council and other partners. And I think we need to do something fairly rapidly on this to mobilise people. You're fortunate at Regmore Hospital that you have a Citizens Advice Bureau in the hospital. You're one of very few hospitals in the United Kingdom that actually has bureau offices in them. So that should be leveraged off immediately to try to get people engaged with linking into the clinicians and the nursing staff to make sure the referrals, as Linda said, are picked up so that we can actually make sure that we get the help for people. But just to, benefit take up, income maximisation is key to this. Citizens Advice in Highland raised £15 million a year of benefits that people are entitled to. That's £15 million. If you think of the population of Highland, that's an extraordinary figure. Deal with over 15,000 people a year and 55,000 contacts. So the expertise is available in Highland to help people. And I think really about the key to this, I think, is to join everybody up so that we can get economies of scale, we can get the right people in the right place at the right time with the right interventions that actually can change lives and provide the supports around them. But this is a fantastic document, and I think if we can just build on this further and maybe include the likes of Citizens Advice in future consultations on it, and because they are, and I know I'm declaring an interest, they are the player in Highland for this type of thing, and I think that's something that could really be taken forward. In terms of fair work, Adam's absolutely right. That's a huge problem. And what people are not seeing is, stories of firms that have been claiming the furlough payment, but they've laid the staff off 3 months ago. But the money's still going into some of these businesses. A lot of unscrupulous stuff been going on as well throughout the COVID period, as well as some very responsible employment practices from employers. And I think we've got to all make sure we're on the same page to provide the supports that people are going to need moving forward. Thank you.
Tim, do you want to respond?
Well, I just say that I agree with Alice's comments, and I think it really emphasises the crucial role of this for the board, for the community, and it's a vital task for us all to take forward. And while I suppose it could be a bit of a hostage to fortune, but I hope that I and others across the board are challenged about this in the future, because it's something that we really need to be doing and need to be addressing. And when it does come back, we need to be confident about what we've done and the difference that's made. So I look forward, assuming that the board is happy to approve the paper, I look forward to robust implementation.
Thanks, Tim. I personally was very interested in the concept of community wealth building. Communities have great resources, and I like the idea of community wealth building. And there's a reference in the paper, a recommendation about setting up a steering group within Highland and Argyll and Bute with partners to explore a model of that. And I think I would like to see us really push ahead with that. We already have reference in the report to the community link workers that are going to be embedded within GP practices. And I wonder what the interactions will be there as well between the community link workers and those charged with community wealth building. Don't necessarily want a response to that now, but just to say that I think the thrust of the comments has been to very much welcome this paper, to see it as something that is pan NHS Highland. It's not just a matter for Tim's team in public health. It's something that is across the organisation, and it has to be interagency as well, as Alistair has pointed to in his remarks. But it's, as Jerry and Anne said, it's what we do now in addressing the recommendations, the very good recommendations in this paper that are going to be important. And I think there may be governance issues as well, which are highlighted towards the end of the paper. That's maybe one for Pam and the EDG to look at after today. Can I take it that you approve the strategy and note the action plan and the partnership working concept, and agree that reports on progress with the plan will be brought to the board. No dissent anyway from that. So I think we have accepted that and approved it. And thank you to Tim, to Linda, and to Alison, and thank you, Linda, for your forbearance with the technology. Okay, we'll move on to the Highland Integrated Children's Plan, item 13 on our agenda for today. And Heidi is the sponsor of this paper, but Heidi is not able to be with us today. And we have, however, Sally Amer, who's the Child Health Commissioner and Public Health Specialist for NHS Highland, and we have Ian Kyle, the Head of Integrated Children's Services for Highland Council, with us. So I would ask Sally and Ian to speak to the paper that we have before us.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start and then Sally can come in a little later. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce this draft of the Integrated Children's Services Plan. I wonder if we can just move on to the next slide, Ruth. I don't know if I can have control, but no, thank you. As you will know from the report, there's a statutory requirement for every local authority and its relevant health board to jointly prepare an integrated children's services plan for the area of the local authority, and this is done every 3 years. The plan that's in front of you today is the North Highlands Integrated Children's Services Plan. The plan really has a significant backdrop, and the backdrop is around a key set of principles that the partnership group are working to. And I would just like to briefly describe a number of these. The first is that the ambition of the plan to tackle the inequalities, and this segues quite nicely from the previous item on the agenda this afternoon. So we seek to reduce the gap in outcomes between our most and least deprived children and our young people in the Highland, and that's really about working to reduce child poverty within our communities and also keeping our children and young people safe from harm. Another key principle that we've focused on in the development of this plan is the love and support for our care experienced young people. And this really is about ensuring that children and young people who have experience of care are loved and supported to improve their life experiences and their life chances as well. Another fundamental principle that we're taking forward is ensuring good health and well-being, including the mental health of our children and young people. That's really about ensuring that all children and young people are supported to achieve and to maintain good physical, mental health and well-being. And finally, our principles also describe the work we're going to do to ensure that we're delivering on the provisions of the United Nations Conventions on the Right of the Child. And I'll come on to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. You can see there outlined our shared vision, but as well as meeting the aspirations of this partnership vision, we're working to a number of key commitments, and it's worthwhile just taking a second or two, I think, to rehearse these because they are incredibly significant. The first is, as I alluded to a second ago, the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child. And this, of course, as you'll know, is now enshrined in legislation with a commencement date very soon, in fact, by October of this year. And it's at that time that children and young people will be able to claim their rights. And there's a responsibility for public bodies to be ready to do this. So as a Integrated Children's Services Planning Board, we're working with Scottish Government, who are working to devise an implementation programme. And it's really important for us to be part of that process, ensuring that we're ready for commencement in October. The second commitment that we've outlined is one which is the promise, which is a response to the independent care review that was undertaken. This the promise puts children and young people at the centre. It is all about listening to the voices of children and young people and getting alongside families. And it's a very important commitment to sign up to. It really is looking for a fundamental change, not just in our care system, but in all of our processes around children and young people. And to that end, we have also made a commitment to the Care Leavers Covenant, which is about ensuring that there are better life chances for our children and young people that experience care as they leave care. It's about recognising where people are, and particularly where they're affected by trauma and adversity. It's about responding in ways that is consistent with how children and young people are and how they present. We also have an enormous commitment to developing across all our partnerships a trauma-informed approach to all of our work across all of our systems. And this is about recognising where our children and young people are, particularly where they are affected by trauma and adversity. And it's about offering that support for recovery and trauma at the same time as recognising it and working alongside children and young people. And our final commitment is to the getting it right approach. And I always think that getting it right is essentially about early intervention. It's about ensuring that the right support will be delivered at the right time by the right people. It's a commitment that Scottish Government have had for some time. And during the course of the next 2 years, there's an aspiration that the practice guidance is going to be reviewed, and a refresh of getting it right is certainly underway. And we need to be attuned to that as we're moving forward. Next slide, please. So given these set of principles and commitments, we've identified a number of priorities for action. And the purpose of this plan really is to pull together the work of a number of pre-existing partnership groups within a collective framework around about these principles and commitments, really with the aspiration of driving forward improvement within these priorities. So from all of that, we've identified the priorities as outlined in the paper, and those are about the ongoing health and well-being, including children and young people's mental health. They're about reducing the inequalities, and in particular with a focus around child poverty. It's about children's rights and their participation in their process, and that's beyond just consulting with children and young people as we develop and deliver services round about them. It's about their active participation in that process. It's about ensuring that children and young people are safe through our child protection processes. And again, it's about our responsibility as corporate parentings moving forward. And also a final priority is around alcohol and drugs, which is a particular issue in our communities just now, and it's really important that children and young people are supported, as well as working alongside parents and other people to make sure that that is something that can move forward. I'm going to pass over to Sally now, who's going to take us through the next slides, who describe a little bit about how we plan to deliver and measure some of these priorities. Sally, thank you.
Apologies, I was talking to myself there. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. So the Integrated Children's Service Plan for the North Highland Partnership, which we're looking at today, details the priorities that Ian has already outlined. And within each plan, there are a series of improvement priorities that each of the working groups will be working with and to deliver around. There's a lead officer from the partnership leading on that work, and it's the responsibility of each group to develop those priorities and actions within the language that we've already talked about, rights-based, trauma-informed, to be sure that there are agreed outcomes and associated consideration of need. And alongside that, what we understand from research around what works and where we can best make a difference with what can be at times scarce resources. From a health service point of view, Heidi and myself have been refreshing our approach to children and young people, and we've recently established or refreshed the Children and Young People's Planning Forum to be a strategic group. So that's going to be a key forum for health colleagues within the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership and the commissioned Highland Council Service to come together, along with colleagues in Argyll and Bute, to think through what the health needs are of children and young people and how we best respond and complement the work of colleagues in universal education services, social care, the Children's Reporter Service, the police, High Life Highland and the youth sector down in Argyll and Bute as well. And that Integrated Children's Service Board has a key role in terms of having oversight of the ongoing work, scrutinising the plans, scrutinising deliverables, and reporting through to the Joint Monitoring Committee, which has oversight of the partnership, but also elements of that reporting will come through to the Highlands Health and Social Care Partnership as part of reflecting on the Commission service within Highland Council. Thank you. Next slide, please, Ruth. There's work going on nationally to develop a national performance framework. We're still waiting for that performance work, and I'm not aware of a deadline for that yet, so it might yet be some time. I think that's going to be a very ambitious framework and probably will apply equally to some of the things we were talking about earlier in terms of the mitigation plan. So the context of children and young people's lives in relation to community, in relation to family, and the things they need as unique individuals, shaped by the things that have happened to them. So performance is key. Our ambitions detailed in the plan need to be made real in the lives of children and young people and their families, and they need to be real for yourselves on the board, so we're not just talking but we're actioning that which we say we're doing. Next slide, please. So moving ahead, the themes within the Integrated Children's Service Plan provide opportunities to address some of the major challenges for children and young people within a universal setting in terms of child poverty, within more identified areas of need in relation to children and young people in the care system, and those who are in need of care and protection through child protection, and where substance misuse and alcohol use by parents can be problematic for children and young people, but equally where children's alcohol use and problematic substance misuse can be a challenge to themselves and they're achieving their goals and the wider community. So that's the end of the presentation, and hopefully we've got some time for some discussion now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ian, and thank you, Sally. Over now for contributions from members of the board. Gaynor first up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sally and Kyle. Sally and Ian for the presentation. I was really interested in the promise for the voice of children and young people being listened to. I think for me, in particular, moving from consultation to participation is a really welcome move. And I noticed that in the report that we were provided with, there were many priorities for improvement and change identified for the 6 key themes that you've outlined in the document. And the delivery of these is clearly only possible through a partnership. And I suppose to go back to what Jerry said about the last paper, how are we weaving these priorities into our own NHS Highland plans and strategies to help ensure some of that delivery? And how would we actively support this as a board?
Thank you, Gaynor. Ian, are you okay if I respond to that? Yeah, so thank you, Gaynor. The scrutiny for the Integrated Children's Service Plan goes primarily through the Joint Monitoring Committee. However, we do have the Commission service within the North Highland Partnership, and as the new partnership agreement is negotiated, there is a refreshed role for the Health and Social Care Partnership Committee to look at the activity for the Commission service, and I'm meeting with Tracy Legema later this week to look at how we align what's happening within the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership. Children and families aren't interested in a divide between who employs who, whether it's in the council or the NHS, so we are tasked with creating seamless care. And I do think that the refreshed approach to strategic planning for children and young people's healthcare affords a further opportunity for discussion and scrutiny around that. So in my mind, that group is a key forum for saying within a health visiting service, what's your role in relation to the promise, in relation to addressing poverty, in relation to drug and alcohol use, and we can spend a bit of time discerning what the requirements are and capturing those within a parallel plan that would go into that plan. Is that helpful? It is really important that these can't be plans that just sit statically on a CD-ROM or on a drive anywhere now. They really do have to be real. Thank you.
I wonder if I could just pick up, Gunnar, on the point you made around participation. For me, it's absolutely fundamental to the work of the various groups that are moving this forward. I think that we can be a little bit tokenistic in terms of the approach that we have to children and young people. We often consult with them too late whenever we've come up with the ideas. And I think one of the things that we have done in the development of this plan is to develop a participation strategy, which is quite different from what we've had before. And we've involved our third sector colleagues in that work as well. And the Children and Young People's Forum have been really instrumental in bringing the voice of children and young people into the development of this plan, and with a longer term view that they will be very much participative in the plan as it drives forward within the time scale of the plan. I just wanted to rehearse that because I think it is a really important point. Thank you, Chair.
You're mute, Boyd.
Thanks. We've got 3 contributors waiting to come in just now. Well, 4 actually, but we'll take 3. And if you hold off responding till we do the 3. Bert first of all, then James, then Anne.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask about child protection, which is one of the themes of the plan. And particularly, I wanted to ask about learning from significant case reviews, whether that is local significant case reviews or learning from national events. And particularly, I wanted to know about how the learning is implemented, but perhaps more importantly, how you monitor that and ensure that any learning that has been implemented has been sustained. Thank you.
And moving on to James.
Thank you, Boyd. I'm really interested in being trauma informed. On page 173 of the report, it says, develop Highlands workforce to ensure it becomes trauma informed. Now, we were very lucky at the board during a development meeting led by you, Sally, I think, telling us all about trauma and the widespread implications of it. I'm just interested to know to what extent has this been rolled out across the NHS Highland workforce?
Thanks, James. And Anne.
Thanks, Boyd. So I just wanted some further clarification on what's the issue about reporting. So I was really pleased to hear from Sally that the discussions about a refreshed approach to where we report children's services is making progress, and that's good. But this is described as a plan, and it's going forward to the Community Planning Partnership for approval. But there's also mention of the Joint Monitoring Committee as having the primary responsibility. So I wasn't too clear. Could that be clarified? But I'd also like to make a suggestion around this issue about the children's voice, something to explore. As you were talking about that and mentioning, Sally, the refreshed role for the Highland Health and Social Care Committee in this work, it occurred to me that we've just appointed two lay representatives to that committee. You know, one described as a patient public representative and one as a carer representative. So it occurred to me that we really need to look at how young people might have a voice at that committee if we are going, you know, if we're refreshing the children's services reporting into that committee. It may, you know, it may not be appropriate to have a similar structure as having a representative on the committee. Would need to look at other more appropriate methods. But I'd like to suggest that we have a look at that offline and see if we can develop some specific approach to ensuring that there is a children and young person's voice, you know, and somehow heard in the committee when it is discussing these issues. Thank you.
Okay, Sally and Ian, would you want to respond to these three contributions on various questions and points that have been raised?
Yes, I can do. Ian, do you mind if I start off from a health point of view and then you kick in with the wider integrated approach? So coming back to the original question around child protection, keeping children safe is a really important part of our work as a health board. Babies, children and young people, by dint of age and voice and physical vulnerabilities, don't have a voice if they're often don't have a voice, and by definition trauma shuts down a voice, and some things that happen to children are really difficult to explain to others, even as adults. And it's why this language of being trauma informed and trauma responsive is so important. As part of the refreshed approach to children and young people within the board, Heidi Mays has established a child protection health group. So that brings, again, Argyll and Bute and the Health and Social Care Partnership and colleagues in the Commissioned Highland Council service in one place, just to look at and understand our responsibilities to keeping children safe. And Dr. Sevny Govenden, who's our lead doctor for child protection, leads on that work. So the learning from significant case reviews, as well as going through the multi-agency child protection committee, will also come through that child protection health group. Within the multi-agency child protection committee, there is a subgroup that looks at learning and development, and that's where the key learning points are fed through at a partnership level. And I'll certainly take back that comment that we'll be really clear within the child protection work, it's just starting, that we're looking specifically at what our health service responsibilities are in relation to that. Because anybody who's familiar with these reviews will see that there is often a consistent theme. And it does seem as if we really struggle to respond to what is really difficult learning in terms of the way our workforce are supported to share information, to keep children safe and to intervene in that timiest way. So absolutely, it is absolutely a priority. Ian, did you want to add anything at that point?
Not around the child protection, Sally, thank you, no.
Okay, so if we then move on and look at James's observations around trauma informed, then it's always nice to know that people remembered a presentation. I think if you look at that integrated children's service plan, it is infused with many opportunities, and that's why we have this language of being trauma informed and trauma responsive as a cross-cutting theme. But again, it's one of these phrases that's tripping off the tongue, but what does it actually mean in practice, and what does it mean in reality? And when we look at the wider literature around being trauma informed, it actually asks something of each and every one of us. Trauma and adversity in child isn't just something that happens to other people over there. It's around this table. It's in our own family systems. It's in our communities, and sometimes it's in our individual lives in terms of the way we see and understand and respond to the day-to-day. So that infusion, the cross-cutting this way and that way, is within the report. In terms of what action has actually been taken through developing the workforce, I think COVID has impacted on many of our areas of work, and it's certainly impacted on some of the developments we would have liked to have seen around that. But we do have Fiona Hogg now as the trauma lead for NHS Highland. There are now trauma identified champions across NHS Highland, and I am pleased to have that role from public health. So within our health responsibilities, within that strategic planning group will be starting to look at what does that mean. We're developing with new monies that are going to be recurring an infant perinatal mental health service at the minute, which is again infused with that language of trauma-informed and responsive. And if you want to take a catchphrase away from this discussion today, it ties in with some of the wider media coverage of Oprah Winfrey and Prince Harry talking about this language of what happened to you if we all stopped and paused and asked a little bit more often when we're finding ourselves in a tricky situation, what happened to you? Just find that space to be curious, that bit more mindful. We might just actually find different opportunities to respond either to our own thoughts and feelings and to the behaviours of others that can often be very problematic. It doesn't excuse poor behaviour, but it can give a context for it. With the NEST training, there's 4 layers of training within NEST. There's a very clear framework there. We can now start to pull data off to look at how different teams have or haven't participated in that online training. And key to that is finding a way of making that training real. So some of the early discussions is, can we identify a certain time of the week at a certain time of the month where we would invite more discussion for people who are interested? But again, it's early days for some of that work. And just more recently, in relation to the discussions we'd had around supporting work in Caithness and Sutherland with the violence reduction unit, there have been conversations with Conrad Trickett, Chief Superintendent of the Police, just to pick up some of that work as well. So that's starting to bring the public protection committees at the sharp end of adversity in many people's lives: child protection, community justice, drug and alcohol, violence against women, and adult care and protection. So it's very much a case of watching this space. Ian, did you want to add anything at that point?
Thanks, Sally. No, I think that the points you made around the workforce and the need to have a consistent approach around that and to make it a significant staff development concern is absolutely right. I think just picking up on Anne's point, I think that Scottish Government described the current reporting and planning environment as being complicated, and I think that it is. And one of the things that we tried to do in producing this document from a governance perspective is to tidy that landscape up as best we can, making sure that we actually have the space to drive forward our priorities. So in terms of a reporting structure, then Sally outlined, and it's within the paper, that we have an integrated children's services board, which is a community planning partnership board, and it's got key people from the NHS and from Highland Council, but in addition it's got people from our other partnerships as well, and they have that key responsibility. So from a governance perspective, that group is tied very much to the Community Planning Partnership Board, given its membership, and the reporting will go there. And there is a statutory requirement for us to report on this plan every year. In terms of updates, we provide that update to Scottish Government. We'll be providing that update to the board, but I think there's also a commitment to provide that update back through the various other governance places, back through this board, back through committees at council as well. And I think as part of the assurance work that's ongoing, it's likely that updates will be provided to the Joint Monitoring Committee as we move forward. But from a governance perspective, this work is rooted through the Community Planning Partnership Board, if that's helpful at all.
Thank you both.
Excuse me, Boyd, sorry, could I just pick up on Anne's point as well around the board specifically in terms of participation of children and young people? There are new requirements and duties on the board in relation to participation and involvement of children and young people, and it is something that we need to think of as part of the wider discussions around the way the board responds to children and young people and works with them. There is discussion around how children and young people feature in the board discussions, and there could well be and should well be scope to think about how children and young people themselves might be involved with that. But what we need to do is make that real, not a tokenistic. We'll just invite you. So I think there's a particular work stream that needs to take place around the children and young people strategy group specific to that. And we'll pick that up as part of the discussions in that meeting, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Reading the document, both Ian and Sally, I'm assuming at the outset that when you talk about child, you're talking about from 1 hour old or just born all the way through to leaving school and then going into the university early 20s. There's an awful lot of support and help mentioned from my point of view from school onwards, but there doesn't seem to be much in the way of preschool. What's happening to you know the 0 to 4s? Is it just a health visitor, or is there other help that the families and the babies can get? Thanks.
Sam,
Yeah.
did you want? Sorry, first.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
Susan. Sorry, Susan, did you have a question? Saw the hand up before. No, okay, thanks. Okay, Sally, back to you.
Thank you, and apologies. No, your point is really well made. If it was my way, we'd talk about infants, children, and young people integrated children's service plan, because they all deserve a voice, and actually the fascinating thing about infancy is it is the most potent developmental time, at the one time when they don't have a voice, and those experiences in utero and for the first 1,001 days of life from conception through to 2.5 hours lay the template for much of our life that follows, which is why the commitment for the Scottish Government for ongoing infant mental health and perinatal mental health money is so welcome. And there's a raft of work going on around that I'm happy to detail to you outside of the meeting if that's helpful. Health visitors, midwives are within the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership, and health visitors are part of the commission service within Highland Council. There are also primary mental health workers, and there's the child and adolescent mental health service within the Health and Social Care Partnership. So again, children crisscross from the NHS to the council and back to the NHS. They don't necessarily realise they're crossing those organisational barriers, but the cultures and practice around the way we support parents is key. James Brandon referred earlier to previous discussions around adversity, and the film Resilience talks very much about, if we want to change the outcomes for children and young people, we have to change the lives of the adults involved in their lives. So how do we support parents in their capabilities and capacities to parent well, particularly as the more adversity you've had, the harder it might be to parent? And if you haven't had some of those behaviours modelled to you, how do you actually know how to parent and how to parent well? So again, that just comes back to the training and education and support that will sit around that infant and perinatal mental health team as well, and indeed where learning resources might sit within education and within the curriculum around that, because where we break into those intergenerational effects is really interesting, isn't it? Do we give the information to young people themselves, the basis of empowerment and knowledge? We have to work proactively with parents when they're struggling, and it does very much come back to that key question: what happened to you? We get nowhere by blaming and shaming people. Blaming and shaming people just takes them back to a pre-verbal experience where so much of our culture tends to put babies away, out of sight, out of mind, controlled crying, all those discussions. So these are big and ambitious aspirations we have from a public health point of view, but they are actually really, really important. And this is a 5, 10, 15, 20 ongoing process of looking for change. And I wouldn't wish to underestimate the challenges in that, as much as it is really important that we create spaces to look at that. So yes, this is an integrated children's service plan for babies and children and young people and their parents in the context of the individuals, the family and the community lives, which is why it comes back to the early discussion around mitigating the effects of COVID, because mums and parents have had disrupted antenatal journeys. Infants in SCABU have had less contact with parents. We don't know what the unintended consequences of COVID will be on children's health and development, but I think we have to be thoughtful rather than catastrophizing it, and it is incumbent on all of us to work hard to create the environments where children can thrive again, notwithstanding some of the challenges that they've had. And Those of you who were part of the previous discussions will hopefully recall that whole language of we all need some stress. You know, stress is how we survive and respond to the day-to-day. It's how we wire up our systems. Many of us can deal with tolerable levels of stress when we know we're going to go back and someone's going to hold us and keep us safe, be it going to school for the first time, be it going to nursery for the first time, be it a school exam, be it going for a part-time job. But it's babies and children and young people who find themselves in a place of unmitigated, intolerable stress, where the harm follows, where we create dysregulated physiologies, dysregulated immune systems, metabolic systems, stress responses. So this stuff is really important, and actually it's important through to the age of 25. So some really interesting discussions in the justice system now around actually young people who find themselves in conflict with the law. How do we walk alongside those young people rather than expecting more of them than actually might actually be possible, given that question of what happened to you? So big challenges in there, but we do all have a role to play, and we do better at fulfilling those roles when we can join the dots around how what happened to us explains behavior, and how the adults as parents and adults as professionals and adults as safeguarders responding kind to and understand children's communication and behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, Sally. Ian, is there anything you would like to add in conclusion?
No, I just would want to say thank you very much for the challenging questions this afternoon. I think they're something that the Integrated Children's Services Planning Board will reflect on in terms of just refining some of the specific actions within the plan. I would draw people's attention to the fact that there are more detailed plans sitting below this plan. There was a point at which I had included them in the draft, but it was running to 124 pages. I don't think you'd thank me for that in the report today. So, but it's just to say that they're only a link away if people are interested in some of the very detailed plans that are under development there. So thanks ever so much today. Thank you.
Thank you for sparing us from additional reading at this juncture. You'll have gathered that the board is very engaged with this subject, and we have very much welcomed your paper and your presentation, and thank you very much indeed both to Sally and Ian.
Thank you.
We move on now to item 14, which is the review of the Health and Social Care Integration Scheme for Argyll and Bute IJB, and Ruth, I think, is going to update us on this one.
Oh, thank you, Boyd. Yes, well, you might remember that last year you approved revisions to the original integration scheme, and we got some feedback from Scottish Government. So this report is here to advise you that Scottish Government has now given their approval to the scheme, and it's been signed off by Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport, and that both Argyll and Bute Council and NHS Highland will publish the document. So it's here for your information and for noting. An equivalent report was submitted to Argyll and Bute Council on 5th April, and so that was approved at the beginning of April from the council's side of the bargain.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. This is really just for noting, because we've discussed this at previous board meetings and at IJB meetings, unless Sarah wants to add anything.
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Boyd. I think certainly those of us who sit on the IJB have seen this numerous times. I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you.
Indeed. Or do you want to add anything from an Argyll and Bute IJB perspective? Fiona?
No, but thank you. It'll give me plenty of reading to do as I take up my role. So no, just for noting, thank you.
All right. We've noted item 14 and we move on to item 15, and it's back to Ruth to introduce the item on governance annual reports, Governance Committee annual reports.
Yep, and again, this is for noting, confirming that the annual reports for the board's governance committees have been approved by each of your individual committees, and they were submitted to and agreed at the last audit committee on the 4th of April. There are just a couple of minor tweaks to a couple of those annual reports. I've been advised that Philip McRae was not actually a member of the Staff Governance Committee for the period of the annual report. So in fact, he shouldn't be listed on the attendance list. And in fact, that he was present at the Health and Social Care Committee on 2nd December and has been marked as having been absent. So with those two minor revisions, the annual reports are here for your information and for noting, and they'll be made. Those revisions will be made.
Thank you, Ruth. Are there any further amendments to be made? If not, can we note these changes and endorse the reports? And move on now to item 16, which is the Community Empowerment Act and the annual reports on that front. And I'm afraid it's back to you again, Ruth.
It's back to me again, it is. So yes, this is the annual reports for the two elements of the Community Empowerment Act for which we have a responsibility, and that's asset transfers and public participation requests. So they're both there for your approval. In terms of public participation requests, there have been no requests at all throughout the last financial year. So that's a nil return on that. There's been some activity on asset transfers. While we didn't actually receive any applications during the last year, we have completed some previous ones. If you want more information, I'm sure Alan is available to be able to give you more detail, but I understand that those applications relate to the sale of land and premises at Applecross and at Cannock. So they're there for your approval.
Okay. Has anybody got any questions about these two reports? If not, asked to agree to the annual reports. I take it we are in agreement. Thumbs up. Okay. And we're going to give Ruth a break now because we're turning to the Gaelic Language Plan Monitoring Report. And I'm very pleased to introduce Nicola Nicola Thompson, former colleague of mine at Solomore Ostig, whom we have engaged to do some work on the Gaelic Plan, which really had fallen between stools in terms of our executive arm in the recent past. And possibly just before Nicola comes in, maybe Pam, you want to say just a little bit, Pam or Fiona, just a little bit about as to the situation with the plan.
Yep, I'm happy to come in. Yeah, we did a bit of a review around where we were at with the Gaelic Plan and what sort of capacity and capability that we required to try and progress this and to get ourselves into the right place. So it's very fortuitous that we were able to find ourselves in a position where we could work with Nicola, who has that capability to assist us in taking us to a different place. And so we have duly engaged with Nicola for a period to work with us. So really just as a way of introduction, that's what I wanted to say. I don't know if Fiona, if you have anything you want to add.
Thanks, Pam. No, it's great having Nicola on board, and obviously, as she'll sort of talk about, one of the things we're keen to do is look both at our short-term plans, but also what do we need to really then, once we've got the plan in place, the resource and the support to drive this forward. So it's great to work with Nicola and help push this forward, and I'm sure she's going to tell us a bit more about it.
Okay, Fiskerman Nicola, over to you.
Fiskerman Boyd, Morantang, thank you very much for inviting me here today. Yes, you'll have seen the paper which was written a number of weeks back. So I'll just briefly go over the main points and then give you an update. So as Pam explained, I'm going to be working with the various teams across the organisation to look at the current Gaelic plan, which is in place until 2023. There hasn't been an awful lot that's happened so far, but we do have funding which we actually received last year. So my initial role at the moment is to try and progress with that. So we're looking at the moment at things like awareness raising. We're hoping to get some videos done just explaining why Gaelic matters within the organisation, both to staff and to patients. We also had a good initial meeting with interested members of staff, and they came up with some really useful ideas too. A couple of them also have volunteered in their own surgeries, hospitals, to take a lead locally, so that's been really encouraging for me. And we hope to have a formal implementation group set up. There was one previously, but it has kind of fallen by the wayside. As you'll have seen in the report, there is a monitoring report due at the end of June. So I have had a couple of meetings with Boris na Gaelic, and they do understand the situation. So we've no concerns about that. We'll complete the monitoring report and hopefully have some progress to report on. We've had, well, we've not managed to progress the logo so far, which needs ministerial approval, apparently. So that's one of the key areas that I'd like to develop, because I think it's important. And obviously, once the logo is bilingual, it can be used everywhere. Also, since writing the report, I've been in touch with my counterpart in the Western Isles. They've made quite a bit of progress on their third plan. So we're hoping to work together on a number of areas rather than reinventing the wheel. And obviously, they're aware that quite a number of their own patients access NHS Highland services too. I think that's it. So looking at, as Fiona said, looking at short term and longer term, we'll be looking at specific roles where we might want to include Gaelic Essential or Gaelic, sorry, I'm thinking in Gaelic, Gaelic desirable roles. Looking, you know, initially possibly at some of the new reception areas, things like that. Possibly implementing some training onto the tourist platform, different levels, Gaelic awareness, possibly for all staff, and then something a bit more detailed for those interested in including Gaelic in their day-to-day work. I had put a request in the internal newsletter just to find out anecdotal stories about how it comes about that people use Gaelic. So that's been really interesting, just getting that insight, and just also how beneficial it can be for patients and staff. So I think that's probably most of the points at the moment. Happy to take questions or any comments.
Could just add a little bit of information that last Friday afternoon I spent some time overseeing the production of bilingual audio file for the lifts in the new hospital in Broadwood.
Good stuff. Yeah, there's been quite a bit of that happening too, the signage and the lift prep. That's good.
So that's the plan. That's the plan in action.
Good.
I think there is an issue that the monitoring report has to be submitted in June, but we will have to consider it at the July meeting. There is an awkward time issue there, so it'll have to be done retrospectively at the July meeting. Okay. Any questions for Nicola? Ruth?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to ask, would it be helpful if the board were prepared to delegate authority to you, Boyd, to submit that, and then it can come back for noting to the next meeting.
I think that probably would be useful. Alex?
Thanks, Boyd. Nicola, is there anything we as a board can do to put a bit of push and pressure on getting that logo approved and changed? Because it seems a strange one when you think that Highland Council have got all their road signs in bilingual, and I just don't understand why you're getting a blockage there, or at least it would appear to be a block coming from government level. Thanks.
Yes, I think because the Western Isles already have their logo bilingual, so we were just doing the same thing. We weren't changing the look. I'm not sure if Ruth Fry is with us today, but it seems to be stuck at NHS Scotland level, and Ruth's not been able to get any further. So I'm not quite sure how it works, the internal mechanics, but that's the line we've been given, that it requires ministerial approval. So if any of you are able to be in touch with those involved in NHS Scotland or otherwise, that would be really helpful.
Okay, Ruth is here, and I'll ask her to come in just now, and then Jerry, and then Pam. Ruth.
Yes, just really to reiterate what Nicola's said there. So the difference between us as an NHS board and Highland Council is our brand, if you like, comes underneath the NHS Scotland branding. And therefore, yes, any changes to that logo do have to get ministerial approval. So my understanding is that the Western Isles version has been bilingual from the start, whereas ours would be a change. So that's the issue to be discussed. And while NHS Scotland was gearing up to look at refreshing their brand guidelines pre-COVID, for understandable reasons, that work has been delayed. So we have asked to be involved in any future discussion of refreshing those guidelines, and we'll continue to see what can be done in that respect.
Sounds as if it's a bit like the issue with Argyll and Bute as well, and the any change of name for our board. The same response was got to that. Jerry?
I was just going to say, Boyd, when I was at the ambulance service, it might be one of these ones where we chose not to ask the question, because we put ambulance services on the side of the ambulances in Gaelic now.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So one half is in English, one half is in Gaelic. So it is, because we couldn't afford to do it on both sides in English and Gaelic.
I think we can speak to our local MSP, Kate Forbes, in the first instance about that, possibly.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll pick that up out with the meeting and see if there's anything else that we can do around that. I suppose as a board and as execs, the bit is about the importance that we place on this and the recognition that we give to this, and that's really the role that we can take. Now, I so far have failed to learn the few Gaelic statements that I was going to learn, but that's still an ambition. I'm not sure if I'll get beyond the statements, but there's something about our sign up to this and our endorsement of it, and I think that's probably the key bit from a board and exec team perspective.
I thought your pronunciation of Sláinte was very good when we were in Ireland last week.
Bowmore's a nice distillery.
Fiona.
Yeah, and I suppose it was just to echo, I think what even in the short time Nicola's been with us, and we've discovered some interest and some talent and some amazing stories actually from examples of what goes on, particularly in terms of supporting patients and communities around this. So I think it just goes to show putting a little bit of attention around it, trying to get the communications channels open and seeing what we can offer to colleagues who do have an interest. I, like Pam, I've got a real interest but never actually had the time or commitment, and I think my and I think there's lots of people like that. So I do think we can really kind of capitalize on the support we've got here, and understand, even just doing a bit of an inventory around our staff, of understanding who does, you know, have the ability to speak Gaelic, and what's their level of, you know, kind of interest in helping promote that. And it might be that using a tool a bit like our Culture Amp, you know, we can do custom surveys on that. So it might be that we could do a bit of a poll around staff to understand what we've already got plus what people are interested in. So I think there's a great opportunity there.
And we do have the tourist site, and maybe we could do something through that as a development tool. Yep. Okay, we're asked to approve the monitoring report, but we don't have the monitoring report as such as yet. But there was a suggestion. But was it Alex who made the suggestion? No, somebody else made a suggestion that we could delegate authority. Ruth, it was Ruth, that we could delegate authority to myself as chair, and I would suggest to Pam as chief executive to approve the report. Would you be happy to proceed in that way? Yes. Okay. Thank you, and thank you to Nicola.
Okay, tap alive.
We move on to item 18 now, which is the register of members' interests. Ruth.
Thank you. Yeah, this is just to note that we've undertaken the annual exercise to update the register, and it's now complete, and your up-to-date register is now on the web. So it's just for information and just for noting.
Thank you. And on to item 19. Governance and committee assurance report, and the opportunity for chairs of governance committees to bring any matters to our attention, beginning with Gaynor at Clinical Governance.
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing to escalate to the board this week, thank you.
On to staff governance and Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to note other than what you will be able to read in the minutes. Happy to take any questions, though.
Any questions for either Gaynor or Sarah? On to Alex with finance, resources and performance.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, nothing to add. We discussed it quite extensively earlier on in the agenda under the IPQR reports and the finance, etc. Thank you.
Any questions for Alex? Not seeing any. On to Anne, Highland Health and Social Care Committee.
Thanks, Boyd. I just would like to draw members' attention to the first part of the minute and the report of the experience item that we had featuring social care staff involved both in care home and care at home services during the pandemic. It was an excellent presentation and a very important opportunity for us to hear about how our colleagues delivering social care services had experienced the pandemic. And as we're a public committee, the session is or should be available to view, and I would like to encourage all the board members to have a look at that section of the recording to hear firsthand the experiences of our colleagues. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, that did sound fascinating, Anne. Any questions for Anne? Going back now, Alice just pointed out to me that I've been remiss and omitted him. Audit, Alistair.
Okay, no, thank you, Boyd. Quite a lot of people like to miss me out, but for other reasons. I think one of the main things we discussed at the audit committee was the outstanding management actions and the follow-up, and just to ask executive colleagues if they could have one last push to get these cleared up before the next meeting of the audit, committee, because obviously the less we have outstanding, the better it will look. And there is not that many outstanding. It's been a tremendous effort so far. So just one last attempt to try to get these cleared up, which would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. Any questions, Alistair? If not, we move on to the Area Clinical Forum and Margaret.
Thanks, Boyd. Yeah, we had very useful discussions at the last ACF around culture and whistleblowing, and Bert was present as the non-executive director on that occasion, so that was really helpful having you there, Bert. I think it added a lot to the discussion. Other areas that we focused on included long COVID, the pathway around that, and the need for identification of funding, and the urgent care work, which is also being progressed. And I suppose the other thing to mention is the Area Clinical Forum is looking forward very much to being involved, engaging in the forthcoming systems leadership work with the King's Fund. We've had a good response to people engaging in that, so very positive. And just if anybody has any questions about the rest of the content of the minute.
I note, Margaret, that you had a repeat of the presentation that was made to the board earlier from ICU staff, and that you're intending to do a reprise of the one to the Highland Health and Social Care Committee. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was actually the three nurses that received awards that we had at the meeting presenting. Yes, and our intention is to have, as you've just said, the ICU at the next meeting. So we're really cashing in on what the board's already done. I think that was so moving and so impressive. And just we did used to have a sharing item on the agenda a few years ago, and it fell off the agenda for whatever reason. So we're resurrecting that, and these issues at the current time, beyond the three nurses coming, just feel like the right thing to do, and be really good. And the people that came along, the nurses that came along, were really grateful to be invited and really said they really enjoyed presenting to the forum and got a lot of very positive feedback and questions. So I think it was great for us, and I think they appreciated it as well. So I suppose it's quite a good example of just sharing with staff. So we would intend to make that a standing item, that we've always got some sharing going on, and looking to the various clinical groups to put forward suggestions for that.
Kate, you wanted to come in?
It's just on, I'm sorry to be very pedantic, just on a point of detail. I note that the ACF notes are in draft format. And Margaret, I think there might be reference to the NMAP Leadership Committee in the ACF notes, where in fact I think it should say the area NMAP Advisory Committee. So I'm not sure about the sequencing for the ratification of notes coming here, but just for a point of correction.
Yeah, the notes, Kate, are still in draft form, because these are the committee meets on the 1st of July, so the committee hasn't ratified those minutes yet, but normally they come here in advance of that, so they are still draft. So thanks for that. I'll check that when I'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Any other points for Margaret? Not at the moment, anyway. Finally, in this section, is back to Sarah for the Argyll and Bute IJB.
Thanks, Boyd. Just one thing that I wanted to pull out. I realised reading the minutes, for those who haven't been involved in the more detailed discussions, might look at our closing financial position for the last financial year as being quite exciting, with an underspend. Just to kind of point out to people, it is of course correct. Judy Orr's accountancy and finance skills are exemplary, but it is a bit of a false picture, and that's to do with activities that were slowed and paused during COVID, plus the combination of funding from Scottish Government for COVID expenditure. So whilst that looks or is very positive for our closing financial position, it doesn't reduce the challenge and the kind of the hill that we need to climb this year, and our transformation work that needs to happen. So it was just to bring that out, because I think it doesn't quite come through as easily in the minutes. So just to draw people's attention to that.
Thanks, Sarah. Any points for Sarah? I think I noted with interest the Lauren and the Islands Hospital receiving generous donations. It was mentioned in Joanna's report, and that's good to see the community responding like that. Anything else to ask Sarah about, other than the fact that it was a very interesting meeting, obviously, with a vote, even a vote taken.
It was. We tested our. The good news was we tested our standing orders, and our standards officer advised that they were robust and fit for purpose. So that was excellent.
Reassuring. Okay. Any other competent business? I can't believe that we were reached here before schedule today. The date of the next meeting is high summer, 22nd of June. Maybe summer will arrive before then. That's the meeting to deal with the annual accounts, to approve the annual accounts, principally for that purpose. But we do have one or two other items of business as well. Any other items just now from colleagues? Don't see any hands up. So thank you so much for your patience and endurance today, and all your contributions. I think we had some very good discussion during the course of the meeting, and we'll convene again in just about a month's time. Thank you all. Modern time. Cheery.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Boyd. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Boyd. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
And
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a love.